We have North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who it seems like it's longer ago than this that you announced that you're running for president, but it only was like last week, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, I can't imagine the schedule that you've been on since then. But I'm going to ask like one or two local questions first. If that's
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good to be with you, Tim.
So, and I'm an education guy. So in terms of North Dakota, sometimes higher ed, which I work in, fully admit, sometimes they have good sessions. Sometimes they don't have great sessions either. It depends upon where the state is, money and the climate and everything. But what could higher ed do better so that they more consistently have good sessions, have good interactions with elected officials in Bismarck? Is there something that you go, here's two suggestions that I would suggest to you from a higher ed standpoint, folks, and then you'll be received better. Is there something that comes to mind?
Well, Tim, first of all, thanks for hosting today. Thanks for your long leadership in the North Dakota Senate. Thanks for your long leadership in North Dakota higher education. What I'll share with the listeners today is the same thing I've shared with the chancellor and with a number of the university presidents, but higher ed had a fantastic, unbelievably great session. And if the session is determined by inputs, the record, I mean, close to,
right.
But between the research buildings in ag and what went on at UND and across the state, Mayville, Bismarck, close to $400 million of capital investments going into fixed costs at the campuses, increases in support for higher education funding, and of course efforts to hold tuition down, and then for students, but then replace that revenue for back at the university. So from an input standpoint, it's remarkable. But it turns out that in businesses, in the business sector, sometimes if you put more money into a business, it doesn't mean you get more sales out the other side. It doesn't mean you get better products out the other side. So my challenge to everybody in higher ed is, hey, you're winning the input battle, but man, we got to think about how does higher ed relate back to the economy of North Dakota, the future of North Dakota. And on the research side, I think we're doing great work, but in terms of how we're turning out workforce, we still have over 35,000 jobs available in the state of North Dakota. If you took every high school grad, every college grad, it wouldn't fill all those jobs that we have. And so we did get great progress on career and technical education, which is that slice of spending that's not higher ed and it's not K-12. It always fell in between, but we've got to get certificate programs and more integration of career and technical both into K-12 and into higher ed, so that we can have, a student can have an option. They don't need to spend 4 years in school and pile up a bunch of college debt just to learn a skill that they can earn a good living in today's economy. In today's economy, a 16-week certificate program could get you the same paycheck as a 4-year degree. So my challenge goes out to everybody to say, now you got the inputs. The challenge to all of you is, hey, let's make sure we make the best use of those, because in a world where the fixed cost of a campus, the buildings, the heating, the infrastructure, the roads, everything that goes into a campus structure, that's got to get leveraged over more students. And right now, in some cases, we've got declining student enrollment, and we've got to, what's going up maybe is online, but we've got to make sure that we're selling a product that people want to buy as a way to get more students involved in higher ed.
Okay. Now we're going national.
Okay.
We got our one local question there. So in terms of, you've been to Iowa, is that right? I mean,
yep.
And I mean, you have a presence in Iowa, New Hampshire, maybe other states. My contacts, like in Iowa and New Hampshire, have been very positive in terms of the reception that they feel that you're getting, that what people are saying. So what kind of feedback are you hearing from those states when you go out and are at dining centers or at pork roasts or whatever else?
Yeah, we've been to all those already, but I would just say the reception's been very positive. And for Catherine and I, it's a great honor to serve as governor and first lady of North Dakota, and it's an incredible honor for us to go tell the North Dakota story on the road to the rest of the nation, because we've got such a great story to tell here. And what we've been talking about on the road is the three things that we think matters to every American, and that's the economy, it's energy policy, and national security, including the border. And when we're talking about those issues that touch everybody's pocketbook or they've touched everybody's family, in the case of the border, I mean, last year, 110,000 overdose deaths in our country, and 70% of those from fentanyl. So it's hard for us to be with a group where they're not moved by the message of the First Lady's story of her own recovery and what we got going on here in North Dakota, whether it's our thriving economy, our forward-looking energy policy, or what the role that we play in North Dakota in national security.
Yeah, because in many respects, North Dakota has much more in common with other states, whether it's overdosing issues, mental health, than they have that are very, vastly different across the board. So what do you think should be done about the border situation, southern border?
Well, as you know, I had an executive order this last week here to send more National Guard troops down to the border, and we have been sending them down there for years, and we had another group that was already scheduled to go this fall, but we did another response, as states often do, when we needed help during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. Many other states sent support to us. Texas Governor Abbott made a request for National Guard groups to help just have personnel on the border to make sure that the laws are being enforced, and we're happy to send those folks down there. When I visited our North Dakota National Guardsmen on the last trip when they were down there, it was remarkable. They'd been involved in 30,000 apprehensions in the first 30 days, and that was probably only a third of the people that were crossing in that sector. We basically have a wide open, uncontrolled border, and all the people, you'd say, well, what was the border security, Customs border security? They were all back pushing paper, processing people that were coming through. They're just so overloaded down there, and it's. I've only made one promise, Tim, so far in my presidential campaign, and I said it took Biden 2 years to get to the border. I said I'll be down there in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah. So this question will take a little bit longer to ask. You talk about the border, and I remember at the time there wasn't $3 billion for continuing the border wall, and yet according to one estimate, the United States has provided about $75 billion to the Ukraine to support the country in its fight with Russia. And what are your thoughts regarding how the U.S. how much the U.S. has contributed? Is it too much, too little? What do you see as the end game for the Ukraine? If you're president, how would you approach this conflict?
Well, first of all, with the spending that's going on in the Biden administration, completing and making sure we've got a secure southern border shouldn't be a financial issue. That's a political issue. We've got the resources to get that done, and it should be done. Relative to the Ukraine, I think that folks are right to be concerned that we've got to make sure we've got accountability on every dollar that we spend. Essentially, we're in a proxy war with Russia. We're doing everything but sending our own troops over there. But yeah, we're in a battle. And one thing that I would say for sure is we've got to make sure this isn't a win for Putin. Anybody in Eastern Europe that thinks that Putin's going to stop if we somehow settle or let his illegal action allow him to consolidate those gains, that he's not going to stop there. We just can't let that happen. And part of it is people say, well, shouldn't be focused on China. Well, of course, China's got the second largest economy in the world. They're threatening U.S. supremacy as the most dynamic economy in the world. And I know from my experience in the software industry that China will, steal every piece of IP that we make. That from direct personal experience. But the thing when we put sanctions on Russia and we lower the price of their oil and gas in the markets for democratic countries, who's getting gas and oil at 20% off? China. We've just turned Russia into China's low-price gas station. So when we're working at this to try to make sure that we're making sure that we have a safe world, because the last 75 years since World War II, the U.S.'s ability to project power around the world is the reason why the United States has thrived and why our allies have thrived. And we have to understand that you cannot separate our economy, energy policy, and national security. Those things are completely intertwined. And if we back away from supporting our allies in Europe, we should actually be selling them energy. Putin would have never invaded Ukraine in the first place if Western Europe wasn't dependent on getting all their energy. Why were they getting energy from Russia? Because the Biden administration is trying to shut down the U.S. energy industry.
Yeah, they've just made such a mess of the whole thing, and it's. But I love your comment about we're in a proxy war with Russia. and that's very very
Yeah,
true.
and we're in a Cold War with China, and we should just admit that we are. It's not like we might be in a Cold War or there's a coming Cold War. We're in a Cold War, and then as anybody that works in state of North Dakota cybersecurity knows that we're in a cyber war every day, because every single day the state of North Dakota is getting some kind of attack from North Korea, Russia, China, state-sponsored hackers that are trying to get at assets here in North Dakota.
So I'm going to ask a question a little bit about your campaign, kind of the the nuts and bolts. Last week when you announced your bid for president, we learned that you need nearly 40,000 donors, individual donors in 21 states or something like that?
Yes.
To be on the debate stage in August.
Yes.
So, where are you at? I mean, are you able to reveal? I mean, are you coming along pretty well? I mean, you've had a really amazing first week in terms of the exposure you're getting nationally on different stations. You're drawing audiences to ones Republicans maybe wouldn't normally watch all the time. So, how are you doing on some of the fundraising and getting your message out across multiple states?
Well, like you said, Tim, it's been an amazing first week, and we're grateful for the response. And anybody listening that wants to learn more, I would send them to DougBurgum.com, where they can keep track of what we're doing on the campaign. And again, as you said, I mean, interesting, the RNC has a 40,000 minimum donor. They have to come from 20 different states minimum, but I'm happy to report that as of Sunday night, I was dialing into a group of sort of ground up volunteers that spontaneously created themselves after our announcement, emanating out of North Dakota. They said, let's help get Doug on the debate stage. Let's all get on a Zoom call every Sunday night and challenge each other. And they were on that call. I dialed into it from New Hampshire, and they told me that, hey, we got 49 out of 50 states. We need one more. And I said, well, I'm jumping off the call to call my friend Scott Wallace in Hawaii. And 15 minutes later, he was donating. So as of 4 days in, we had donors from 50 states.
That's awesome. And we're excited to have in the studio North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who is a presidential candidate. I haven't heard otherwise. I'm guessing the first one ever from North Dakota, first serious one. I mean, we haven't really had any Pat Paulsons, I don't think, from North Dakota that I'm running for president, when they're at the bar too long or something like that. So we promised we're going to ask a couple questions. We'll ask the grittier one first. One of the many important things the president may be asked to do is to fill any opening on the U.S. Supreme Court. If you were to get an appointment at U.S. Supreme Court justice, what will be your criteria as far as things you'd be looking for, judicial temperament, skills, in order to get that one nominee as the best candidate to represent the interests of all people in the United States?
Well, this is one area where having been a governor creates a great advantage for someone running for president, because at the state level, you also appoint when we've had a lot of turnover in North Dakota. And so I've had a chance in my 6.5 years as governor to interview over 50 different candidates for judgeships positions. I think I've won more, and it'll be the record all time for governors. I've made 16 appointments of judgeships in North Dakota, 14 of those at the district level and 2 for the North Dakota Supreme Court. One of those was now is the chief of the Supreme Court. Taking the same approach, but at the federal level, I think one of the key things that I'd be looking for is, of course, people that are really focused on not trying to create law, but just interpret the Constitution. And one of the things that's really dear to myself as a governor is the focus on states' rights, because in so many different incidences, and it touches really every North Dakotan, whether they realize it or not, but it certainly touches every farmer. It touches the oil and gas industry. It touches how we run the state, run our city. The federal overreach is just nonstop from all these unelected bureaucrats and agencies that are reaching into our state. And there's a number of things right now that are, working their way through the courts, and we've had a couple of big wins. I mean, Attorney General Drew Wrigley helping lead the way on WOTUS. Great support from Senator Hoeven, Senator Kramer, and Congressman Armstrong on pushing back on the federal government. But the waters of the USA was going to affect over 90% of the farmland in our state. We won a battle in the federal courts here in Bismarck with Judge Traynor on the oil leasing. I mean, every president since Harry Truman has held the legally required quarterly lease sales for oil and gas on federal land, and even Obama did it. Biden hasn't held one quarterly lease sale, but we've got an 82-page ruling in our favor. So judges really matter, and we've got to get judges that really understand the importance of states' rights.
Yeah, I think that is one thing you pointed out in terms of not only those skill sets, but you've been there, you've done that, you've reviewed people over and over and over again successfully to know what to look for and what to act, and doing the background on all of those. Okay, so now the easy question. Baseball has walk-up, and you're a big sports guy, a variety of sports, basketball, et cetera, et cetera. What would be your walk-up song if you were playing in the Major League Baseball, for a Major League Baseball team?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up this question because, of course, at the announcement, it's been in the news that some of the other folks that have announced running for their presidency this cycle used music that they didn't have rights for. And that made headlines. So when we were going through the checklist of things, we said, let's just make sure we got a song that works for us and whatever. So we were, Catherine and I were proud to be walking up to Ben Gallagher's Every Small Town, sort of fit with the whole theme of coming from Arthur. And so we enjoyed that, and we had the rights to use it.
This is off the wall question, but when you talk about that, like when you prepare, you were backstage. When you're trying to get into your, into the moment. Is there things you listen to at certain times that really pull you up or just mellow you down? Because I would listen to, if I had a big $2 billion bill to carry the floor, I'd listen to Pac Bell, Cannon and D, just to kind of bring me down, get my blood pressure. Because at one time, during when I was carrying a bill, it was 192 over 120, so it was a little high. So is there songs that you listen to or anything, music like that, or is it something else? Is it people you hang around?
Well, I think on that particular moment, backstage, getting to walk out, they had a monitor, and I was watching the First Lady do the introduction, and I was like, wow, she's amazing. Wow, she's just crushing it. Wow, that's incredible. I could listen to her all day. And then a guy tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're on in 20 seconds." So
yeah,
that shot up the excitement level a little bit.
Yeah, she is such a great asset to you, but also to the state of North Dakota.
Yeah.
You're just, and we are so fortunate to have her there. So, another question that comes in from a listener: what are your thoughts regarding the indictment against President Trump related to his alleged handling of classified documents? Some on the right assert that the case was an example of political persecution, political prosecution, as some observers assert that the FBI and the Department of Justice really have been kind of weaponized for political reasons. So, what do you think? Where are you at on some of this?
Well, certainly we heard this at every stop in Iowa and New Hampshire, and the citizens and the voters have a right to be concerned. It's now an open record that over the past 6 years, there's been a lot of activity that was really, when finally unveiled, was politically motivated by those agencies, by the DOJ and the FBI. And so people have a real reason to be skeptical here. I think that when I'm president, a couple things we're going to make sure happen. One is that the law is applied equally, and we're not going to have one set of justice for Republicans and a different set for Democrats. It's got to be applied equally.
On this day in history, in 1903, Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company were incorporated. Revolutionized so much of what happened in the years that followed. What does government need to do to stay out of the way and go back to unleashing the spirit of entrepreneurship?
Well, this is the best question I've been asked so far on the entire campaign trail, Tim. So thank you for asking it, because this is really the core of what we're running on. And we see it here in North Dakota every day. We see it in agriculture. We see it in energy. We see it in the UAS work going on at UND. We see it at Grand Farm here in Fargo. But America wins when we're focused on innovation. That's what built our economy. Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, all the advances in communication and flight, the Wright brothers. Everything that the world depends on today came from American innovation, and then advances in medicine that have been life-changing for this whole world. Coming from the U.S. We have to make sure we stay focused on innovation. But what crushes innovation? Well, high interest rates and inflation. Yeah. But another thing that crushes it even more, it's where innovation goes to die, is with red tape. And that's why, again, so pleased with all of our cabinet leaders and our whole administration here. We passed 51 out of 52 red tape reduction bills in the legislature this year. No one's been talking about that, but that saves saves time and dollars for every single citizen in North Dakota. We've got to do the same thing at the federal level. The federal red tape is choking innovation out of this country, and that is just it's empowering all of our competitors. And if we're going to win against China, we have to beat them economically the same way Reagan. I mean, part of the way we won the Cold War against Russia is we beat them economically in the 1980s. And we got to get back to that understanding right now. And the way to unleash the U.S. economy, fix everything related to spending, taxes, inflation, high interest rates. But we've got to get rid of the red tape because that's another huge hidden cost that affects every product in America.
Yeah, I mean, just the bureaucracy. I was on a committee in the interim for education. And one of the things that schools all across the state had to report on, like 2015, was how many dial-up computers do you have? I mean, like, what a waste of time when they should be doing what they're paid to do, instead of one more report that would come out. So kind of along that line, retirees are a lot worried. People are looking at, well, can I retire or not? The stock market has been, using a generous word, soft. So what can we do to get the economy rolling? You talked about a whole bunch of them, but this is kind of a follow-up to it's a catch-all here too, to really continue to make that charging forward. Because in North Dakota, you've done a lot of things with diversification. Let's not just put it all in one basket type thing. Are there other things that we didn't catch with the previous question?
Well, I think one thing that we really have to focus on is embracing automation. We're in an interesting time. Americans have always led in terms of automation, but I'm talking about automation on the factory floor. I'm talking about automation at retail. I'm talking about automation in the workplace. And we say, why do we have to do that? We have 11 million jobs open in America. In North Dakota, we're among the lowest in the nation in terms of unemployment, 2.1%. We've got the highest workforce participation. North Dakotans work harder statistically than anybody else in the nation. It's not, we in terms of people on unemployment last week in North Dakota, those that were unattached to jobs, it was down to 557 people unemployed against over 35,000 jobs available. So no, if someone walks up and just says, hey, we got to get the people off unemployment and back to work, we've already done that. Say, we got to get them off the bench. We've already done that. What we need to do then to address this gap between what companies want and what we do, part of that is not just throwing more bodies at inefficient processes, it's trying to make sure that we're more efficient. And we did, one place we came up a little bit short, we did get some automation tax credits through the legislature, but I think for a state like North Dakota where we're always workforce short, and we might be capital strong. I mean, there's over $40 billion of capital trying to make its way to North Dakota for value-added energy and value-added ag. We've never had a number that high in our state's history ever. But those folks, when they're calling, when I'm talking to the head of somebody who's they've already made a decision to invest $350 million in North Dakota for a soybean crush plant. The phone call we had was, am I going to be able to get 75 workers? This is from a CEO of a company that's got people in 100 countries and 40,000 people working for him. Can I get 75 workers in North Dakota? Our board's already approved the $350 million. I mean, you remember an era when we had all kinds of people here and we had no capital coming. Now we've got the money coming for the projects. We got to solve the workforce issue. So we're going to bounce around because we only got so much time left. So I got 13 more questions. Sorry, Dawson. This is on artificial intelligence. What is the hope and what is the capacity? How can it be used for good? And what should be kind of monitored so that it's not good? I mean, case in point, in higher education, we're watching because, students can just throw in a question to Chat GPT and get an answer, and then they could turn that in. Well, that's not what this is intended to be. So what can be done? What's the capacity, the ability on the good side, but what do we have to kind of safeguard against? Well, I think the phrase that's been often used is that when you've got advanced capabilities like this, that it's in a tool like we've never seen before, but in the wrong hands or with the wrong guardrails, it also becomes a weapon. And so we have to have the guardrails around that. But as far as a tool, and the U.S. right now leading, some people have called and said, hey, we should take a halt on development on AI for 6 months because we got to figure out some of the guardrails. That whoever's saying that online, that could be a bot from either China or Russia telling us to slow down because they're not happy that the United States has got a substantial lead in artificial intelligence. And what this can do and the capabilities that are there, it has an opportunity to transform every job. And this is something, I don't want to say I've been saying it since my kids were little, but when I used to drop, kids off at school, I didn't say good grades. I said, ask good questions. Mm-hmm. And that always confused the teachers. But I said, hey, we're going to have a time where you're going to be able to look up every answer that you need for almost any profession. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you only know so much in your head, but if you can look it up and have access to all the world's information, so then it becomes who's the best at entering the queries, who's the best at asking the questions, who's the best at sort of interrogating this super intelligence capability.
Yeah, it's like functional intelligence, people that, because you can look up everything, and what can you do with it?
Yeah, and part of it, and then it's available for free. When we had our cabinet offsite on Monday earlier this week for all the leaders, half the day of our focus was how can we utilize the existing tools that are free to make every state employee more productive? What are the redundant portions of someone's job that you can offload to this co-pilot that's sitting next to you that you get for free, that speaks 26 languages, knows calculus, knows how to code. I mean, it does all that stuff. You just have to ask it to do this. I mean, that's available for free today. So that is something that's has to transform every job, and it's a way that we can make government less expensive and more responsive to the citizens.
And we got a question from Ronnie Lee from Forbes.
Well, the question from the peanut gallery kind of goes back to what you were talking about during the Reagan era, the Cold War. At that time, manufacturing for the most part was still in the United States. And I know this is going to be a tough question to answer, but that kind of comes with the territory being a presidential candidate. We saw during the pandemic, most of our prescription drugs are made in China. A lot of other things are made in China. China's a communist government. China has nefarious purposes. Russia is being supported by China. How do we bring manufacturing back to the United States again and stop self-funding China's interests?
Well, Ronnie, it ties in exactly with the conversation Tim and I were just having, because when that manufacturing left the United States, it left because it was seeking low-cost labor. We can bring that manufacturing back now to the United States if we've got the right energy policies. So we've got lower priced, cleaner energy here, and we can bring it back if we're focused on automation, because it isn't all about labor. Most of the manufacturing that's done, even right here in the North Dakota Industrial Park, if you walk out there and see what's going on, it's advanced manufacturing. The automation that exists in the companies right here in North Dakota is remarkable. But that's how America is going to lead. But we can get our supply chains back on shore, and we can do that, and that's going to help raise the standard of living for every American.
I know it's Father's Day coming up, so you'll be hopefully having time to celebrate with your children and everything. But I want to ask you, because I know you lost your father when you were very young, so this is a two-parter. Is there something that was your dad's that you have that's really particularly special? Like for me, I don't have it, but my dad's jackknife, which he's had for 60-some years, is like a family heirloom. But if you were to buy it, it would be like $25. But because of everything, so is there something like that? And then what do you remember about your dad?
Well, first of all, I was moved by listening to you talk about your dad in the prior segment, Tim. It's great, and happy anniversary to your dad and your mom. That's incredible, 69 years. Our dad was amazing, World War II vet, served in the Navy, went down to Castleton and signed up after Pearl Harbor, didn't see mom for over 2 years, because he had a degree from NDSU, he was put into that 90-day wonder program where they turned college graduates into naval officers. Here's a kid that's never seen the ocean, and then he's put on a destroyer and all the way through the Pacific and made his way through Okinawa and all the way to the end of the war and back home again. But things that mom and dad were both hunters, and the first thing that I got actually from him after he died was I got a shotgun, which was great. And then later, my mom had a 16-gauge Ithaca pump, and when she passed away, but before she passed away, she's not hunting in the latter part of her life. So I've got both my mom and dad's shotguns, and that's pretty dear to me. But the Father's Day has always been, for our family, it's been a time to think back and remember. My dad went. We had him for too short of a time, but yeah. He taught us about community, and he taught us about service to country.
When I was driving on the way over, I was thinking about, your father passing and how awful that had to be, and how you've been so go for it. And if we lose $1 million, we lose $1 million. And I can't help but think that, in the back of your mind is like $1 million. You can't hurt me with that. I already lost my dad, and that hurt me worse than any of that money could ever hurt me. So, I mean, I think maybe that's part of the strategy of we're just going to go for it. We're going to be bold. We're going to take calculated advancements, and we're going to win a lot. We may not win every time. I mean, look at a Major League Baseball player. If you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. Yep. So is there anything we didn't cover today before we let you go and let you get back to other things today that you were hoping that we had brought up for you today?
Well, I would just say on that last theme from lessons from Dad, when you lose somebody that young in your life, you sort of realize that life is short, and you got to make every day count. And so I think one thing that every company I've been involved with, every project I've been involved with serving as governor, it's like, hey, we got to make every day count. You don't know if, this is the only day you have. You got to make this one count.
Yep, I totally agree. I think I lost 4 college roommates by the time I was in my mid-40s. So, yeah, you just got to enjoy it and hope for the best in some of those, because sometimes it's just totally out of your control. God's got a plan.
Yeah, and of course, my older brother Brad stepped in and made a big difference in my life when Dad passed away, and then of course we lost Brad in 2010, and what an incredible individual he was. So appropriate that they named the Castleton Community Service Award after him for everything he's done, starting the ambulance service out there and going on over 1,000 ambulance runs as a volunteer. I mean, really remarkable.
Yeah. Well, and I knew your mom. I mean, and your mom was a treasure because of my association with her and different things at NDSU and stuff. So I got to see half of that. So you were really fortunate to have her, because she was just an extraordinary woman. So again, I want to thank you for coming on today. I know you're trying to work a lot of other states that have primaries and everything way out ahead of when North Dakota gets engaged, but I appreciate that you never lose sight of your roots, and I also appreciate your efforts to bring the Theodore Roosevelt Museum and Library to North Dakota, because without your leadership, that wouldn't happen. And that's going to be something that will impact generations that people will be able to learn from. So I appreciate that too.
And they're going gangbusters, and they broke ground last week. There's a scraper on site. Progress it's actually starting, and construction is starting, and they've been named an official USA 250 event. Which means July 4th, 2026, the 250th anniversary of America. One of the only official USA 250 events in the entire Midwest is going to be the grand opening of the TR Presidential Library.
Yeah, and
I'll see you there.
Maybe by then you'll be cutting the ribbon in a different role.
That would be exciting.
So all the best to you and all your helpers out there. I know you got a great team that you've have put together in the past, that you have right now. So all the best to you, and I appreciate you coming on. We'll be right back. I'm Tim Flakoll, sitting in for Jay on the Jay Thomas Show here on 970 WDAY and 93.1 FM and worldwide on the web. So
thank you,
we'll be
Tim.
right back.